They laughed when she stepped onto the mat, the sound echoing through the massive training hangar where nearly 250 elite operators, SEALs, Rangers, Delta, and Foreign Special Forces stood shoulder to shoulder, watching with folded arms as one man sneered, loud enough for everyone to hear, a SEAL that weak. His words carried the weight of arrogance, of years believing strength was measured only by size and reputation, and when he lunged at her without warning, the crowd expected a quick embarrassment, a lesson in hierarchy. But in less than 3 seconds, the air was knocked from the room as she pivoted, redirected his momentum, and slammed him flat onto the mat with a precision strike that shut him down instantly, his body hitting the floor before his mind even realized the fight had begun. The laughter died mid-breath, replaced by stunned silence as instructors froze, commanders stared, and hardened veterans slowly straightened their posture, realizing they had just witnessed something rare: discipline forged beyond ego, strength sharpened by restraint, and a warrior who didn't need to announce herself to dominate a battlefield. As the fallen man struggled to breathe and medics rushed forward, she stepped back calmly, eyes forward, hands relaxed, not seeking applause, because the real message wasn't the takedown, it was the reminder that true SEALs aren't loud, they don't boast, and they never underestimate the one standing quietly in front of them. The silence after the impact felt heavier than the strike itself, as 250 elite operators stood frozen, their instincts screaming that what they had just seen wasn't luck, wasn't a cheap trick, and certainly wasn't weakness. Instructors exchanged sharp glances, knowing the rules had been bent, but the lesson was undeniable. While the man on the mat finally drew a painful breath, his pride shattered more violently than his body, and as he was helped to his feet, something shifted in the room. The casual smirks vanished, replaced by the kind of respect that can't be demanded, only earned under pressure. The lead commander stepped forward, boots cutting through the silence, and reminded everyone that elite forces are built on control, not ego, on precision, not rage, his eyes briefly resting on her as if acknowledging what words could not, while she remained still, shoulders squared, breathing steady, already mentally resetting as if the moment had never happened. Whispers rippled through the formation as operators began reassessing everything they thought they knew about strength, about who deserved the title they wore on their chest, because the truth had been exposed in front of them all: real power doesn't explode, it executes. When training resumed, no one underestimated her again, and every movement she made was watched closely, not out of doubt, but out of respect, because in that single moment, she had rewritten the hierarchy of the room without raising her voice or throwing a second punch. By the time the next phase of training began, the atmosphere inside the compound had completely transformed, because moments like the one they had just witnessed do not fade, they imprint themselves into the memory of warriors who have spent their lives testing limits. And as dawn broke over the training ground, word had already spread beyond the hangar to every corner of the base, turning her into a quiet legend before she ever said a single word. Operators who once ignored her presence now measured their steps when she passed. Instructors adjusted scenarios to push her harder without realizing they were being pushed themselves, and during live drills where chaos was deliberately engineered, smoke-filling corridors, alarms screaming, targets appearing without warning, she moved with an almost unsettling calm, making decisions faster than most could process, neutralizing threats with efficiency that made even veteran SEALs pause and replay the footage later in disbelief. During one exercise, when a simulated hostage rescue collapsed into confusion after a senior operator made a critical error, it was her voice, clear, controlled, and absolute, that cut through the noise, reassigning positions, redirecting fire, and restoring order in seconds, forcing commanders watching from behind the glass to lean forward as they realized something far more dangerous than physical skill was emerging: leadership under pressure. The man who had lunged at her days earlier now stood several Positions away in formation, his posture rigid, eyes forward, no longer driven by pride but by a lesson burned into his bones, understanding at last that strength without discipline is liability, not power. As the final evaluation approached, a grueling overnight operation designed to break even the strongest candidates, rain poured relentlessly, gear failed, exhaustion clawed at minds and muscles alike, yet she continued moving with purpose, lifting others when they faltered, absorbing responsibility without deflection, and when the operation officially ended, leaving bodies collapsed in the mud and silence hanging heavy in the cold air, the senior commander stepped forward and did something none of them expected. He removed his cover, held it to his chest, and addressed the formation not about one fight, not about one takedown, but about what had been proven since that moment, that elite forces are not defined by intimidation, volume, or reputation, but by the ability to act decisively, protect relentlessly, and remain unshaken when challenged publicly, privately, or violently. And as applause finally broke out, not loud, not theatrical, but deep and respectful, she did not smile, did not acknowledge the moment, because warriors like her never chase recognition, they leave evidence behind. And long after the training cycle ended and these 250 elite forces returned to their units across the world, one truth followed them all: they would never again confuse quiet with weakness, because they had seen firsthand what happens when arrogance lunges and meets precision instead. After that day, nothing on the compound or in their minds was ever the same. The 250 elite operators, who had once sized her up with smirks and whispered doubts, now carried a quiet wariness every time she entered a room, every time her footsteps echoed in the corridors, every time her calm eyes scanned the chaos around them. Even the senior instructors, men and women who had trained generations of SEALs, found themselves pausing, reassessing old assumptions about strength, control, and command. She didn't seek attention, she didn't demand respect, yet it flowed toward her naturally, like water finding the lowest point. Only this current carried weight, precision, and authority. The next series of training exercises was brutal: night infiltration through hostile territory, timed obstacle courses designed to drain every ounce of stamina, simulated ambushes that forced split-second decisions under lethal pressure. And yet, where others stumbled, argued, or froze under stress, she moved like a force of nature, predictable only in her unpredictability, fast without haste, confident without arrogance. During one particularly grueling exercise, a multi-story mock compound had been rigged with smoke grenades, live simulation targets, and disorienting alarms. Entire squads were collapsing from exhaustion and panic, unable to follow protocols under stress. She entered the scene silently, observing, reading the chaos as if it were a calm map spread out before her. One operator froze in a doorway, gun raised but unsure of the target. She was there in an instant, redirecting him without force, moving him aside to neutralize a threat no one else had noticed. Another squad was on the brink of failing the mission because communications had broken down. She stepped forward, her voice cutting through the pandemonium like a blade, issuing commands that were precise, short, unambiguous, and followed without question. Within moments, the team had reorganized, efficiency restored, and the mission moved forward, seemingly impossible in the time allotted. As dawn broke the next morning, mud and sweat covering every operator like a second skin, the senior commanders convened quietly behind the observation window. They didn't need to speak much, her actions had already said everything. Every SEAL, every special operator who had doubted her, now understood the unspoken truth: dominance in elite forces isn't built on size, intimidation, or ego. It's built on clarity under chaos, decisiveness under pressure, and the ability to maintain composure when everything around you collapses. Even the man who had lunched at her weeks earlier avoided eye contact, his pride replaced by hard-earned humility. And while whispers of admiration traveled across the ranks, she remained impassive, moving through the training ground like a shadow, quietly correcting, quietly guiding, quietly proving that her strength was not in the show of force, but in its flawless execution. By the end of the day, when the final evaluations were called and reports were written, her name appeared repeatedly, not for a single moment of glory, but for consistency, intelligence, precision, and unshakable control under stress. Across the compound, a culture had shifted, arrogance no longer granted confidence, hesitation no longer escaped scrutiny, respect had to be earned, and she had rewritten the rules without a word, without a fight, simply by demonstrating mastery over herself, mastery over the chaos, and mastery over the unexpected. In the quiet that followed, as the 250 operators gathered to leave, commanders exchanged glances, each silently acknowledging the same fact: the woman who had been doubted, challenged, and underestimated had just redefined what it meant to be elite, and every one of them would carry that lesson forward into every mission, every operation, and every battlefield, forever aware that when